Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The London sun bathed Buckingham Palace in brilliant light, making the gilding and wet cobblestones shimmer. Tourists from all over the world strolled around the square, raising their cameras to capture the iconic facade and the famous royal guards. Among them, a man stood straight and motionless, frozen in the precision of his bright red uniform, the black urchin-shaped hat resting perfectly on his head. This man was no ordinary guard. His name was Marcus Williams, a black man in his 40s, with an imposing build but an elegant and measured bearing. His deep brown eyes reflected unwavering discipline and quiet intelligence. Behind his role as a simple sentry lay a prestigious heritage. The Williams family had served the British monarchy for generations, and Marcus was the heir to that tradition. That day, in the crowd, Catherine Holloway, a wealthy, arrogant blonde woman, approached the guard with a disdainful smile. Her heels clicked on the pavement as she leaned slightly forward, her blue eyes scrutinizing Marcus condescendingly. She was unaware of the young photographer who had already spotted her, ready to capture her every move. In a loud and self-important tone, she declared, "Dirty black man. You're not English. You have no business being here." The voice echoed across the square, and several tourists stopped, shocked. Marcus, true to his protocol, didn't move. Every muscle in his body remained tense, every breath perfectly controlled. He felt the anger, but it must never be visible. His role was to represent honor and discipline, not to give in to provocation. However, inwardly, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on the profound ignorance and arrogance of this woman. She had just insulted not only him, but also his family's history and memory. And she had no idea that this seemingly simple black guard carried the weight of centuries of loyal service to the British crown. Around them, the crowd murmured, some shocked, others intrigued. Catherine, believing she could intimidate Marcus with her wealth and audacity, was unaware that she had just sown the seeds of her own public embarrassment. And Marcus, silent but vigilant, knew that a moment would come when the truth would be revealed, and that this moment would not be at all to his advantage. The contrast was striking, the unpunished arrogance of an ignorant woman versus the quiet dignity of a man who knew more about history and power than she could have imagined. That day, Buckingham Palace became the stage for a lesson Catherine Holloway would never forget. The square in front of Buckingham Palace was always bustling, but that day an unusual tension hung in the air. Tourists, photographers, and even Londoners seemed to hold their breath, watching a spectacle they hadn't anticipated. Marcus Williams, the Black Royal Guard, remained motionless, adhering to protocol, but every fiber of his being was tense with the situation. Catherine Holloway, the blonde woman who had insulted him, didn't yet seem to grasp the magnitude of what she had just done. Her face, usually self-assured and haughty, displayed a mixture of anger and defiance. She moved closer, raising an accusing finger, and addressed Marcus in a voice trembling with contempt. "You should leave here. This isn't your country. This isn't your place." Marcus took a deep breath. He knew that every gesture, every word, would be scrutinized by the crowd and could be ridiculed on social media. So, he replied in a calm and measured voice. "I am here to serve. My role is to protect this place, not to chat with visitors." The crowd around them murmured, some shocked by Catherine's audacity, others admiring Marcus's dignity. A young photographer, standing on a low wall, took several shots, capturing every expression, every gesture. He knew these images would go viral. Seeing that Marcus remained unperturbed, Catherine frowned. Her wounded pride prevented her from admitting she had been wrong. She then tried another, more aggressive approach. "Don't look at me like that. You have no authority here. You're just a..." She didn't finish her sentence. Several shocked passers-by murmured in hushed tones that her behavior was shameful. Marcus, for his part, felt a mixture of calm and determination. He knew that true revenge would not come from hasty words but from time and truth. At that precise moment, Marcus noticed a small detail that made his heart beat a little faster: a tourist's camera. The photos would circulate worldwide. The situation, which had seemed innocuous, was taking on unexpected proportions. He straightened slightly, his gaze fixed on Catherine, impassive but filled with silent authority. This confrontation was more than just a racial insult, it was the beginning of a lesson Catherine Holloway would learn in the most humiliating way possible. And Marcus Williams knew that dignity and patience would be her best weapons. The next day, Buckingham Palace seemed peaceful, as if the tension of the previous day had been nothing but a dream. But for Catherine Holloway, every step through the gilded corridors of the palace was silent torture. She had been invited on a private tour, an exceptional event reserved for a select few tourists. Ironically, Marcus Williams would be her guide for the day. When she entered the main hall, Catherine felt her heart sink. Marcus, always impeccable in his red and black uniform, greeted her with a polite but distant smile. He showed no resentment, no animosity. His upright posture, his calm voice, and above all, his quiet dignity, only accentuated the shame she felt despite herself. "Welcome to Buckingham Palace, Mrs. Holloway," said Marcus in a neutral voice. "That I will accompany you during your visit." Catherine swallowed hard. Every word Marcus spoke seemed to weigh on her conscience. She realized that she had underestimated this man, that she had judged him on the color of his skin and not on his worth or his role. During the tour, Marcus showed off the palace treasures, the portraits of the kings and queens, and explained the history of the royal guard. With each anecdote, Catherine felt increasingly embarrassed, aware of the depth and respect that surrounded Marcus and his legacy. At one point, they passed a large painting depicting a royal ceremony. Marcus explained, "This room has been kept by my family for several generations. My role here is not only to represent the palace, but also the history and loyalty of my ancestors." Catherine paled. She had just publicly insulted a man whose family had served the British monarchy for centuries. Her arrogance and ignorance were now staring her in the face. The other tourists, meanwhile, were beginning to understand and exchanged surprised glances. For Marcus, the situation was delicate but satisfying. He had never had to publicly humiliate anyone, truth and patience did the work for him. Every word, every gesture, every silence worked in his favor. Catherine understood that she was facing a man far more than a mere blackguard, she was standing before the living history of the monarchy. At the end of the tour, Marcus guided Catherine towards the exit, his calm, penetrating gaze weighing on her like a silent judgment. Humiliated but aware that she could say nothing, Catherine lowered her eyes and vowed inwardly never to underestimate anyone again, even though pride still denied her verbal apologies. The lesson had barely begun. Karma, subtle but implacable, was already preparing its course. A few hours after the visit, Catherine Holloway tried to convince herself that she could forget the humiliation of the previous day and the tension of her private tour. But Buckingham Palace had a very particular way of revealing the truth to the arrogant. As Marcus led a small group toward the royal archives, he paused before a large, richly framed painting depicting a centuries-old royal ceremony. The voice of the palace guide accompanying Marcus rang out solemnly. "This room is dedicated to families who have served the British monarchy for generations. Among them, the Williams family stands out for its exceptional commitment and loyalty." Catherine felt her breath catch. Her eyes fell on Marcus, still immaculate in his uniform, and a shiver ran down her spine. She had just realized that she had insulted a man whose family had been honored by the crown for centuries. Marcus, noticing her expression, turned slightly towards her, his gaze calm but full of authority. "I suppose you didn't know who you were talking to yesterday, Mrs. Holloway." Catherine opened her mouth, but no words came out. The crowd around them, understanding the context thanks to the guide and historical explanations, exchanged surprised and impressed glances. Murmurs of respect for Marcus could be heard, some applauded discreetly, others took photos to immortalize the scene. The contrast was striking. The arrogant, wealthy, and self-assured woman was now confronted with Marcus's dignity and living history. She had just discovered that the man she had tried to humiliate was not just a guard, he was a living symbol of loyalty, history, and national pride. Catherine felt shame wash over her. Her face, once haughty, was now pale, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, she realized that her prejudices and racism had placed her in a ridiculous and publicly humiliating position. Marcus, true to his character, didn't utter another word. He didn't need to insult or retaliate. The truth, the story, and his own dignity did all the work. Catherine understood then that words can hurt, but truth and respect are far more powerful weapons. As the group continued the tour, Catherine remained silent, reflecting on her arrogance and ignorance of history. She had just received a lesson she would never forget, and karma had begun to show her its subtle but inevitable power. A few days after the incident, Buckingham Palace became a topic of discussion in newspapers and on social media. Photos of Catherine Holloway insulting Marcus Williams, followed by her confrontation with the Williams family history, quickly circulated around the world. Catherine, now aware of the gravity of her mistake, tried to limit the damage. Her attempts to justify her behavior seemed futile. Everywhere, comments emphasized her arrogance and racism. Every word she uttered only served to highlight her ignorance. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his service with the same dignity, unperturbed. The press began to celebrate him not only for his discipline and professionalism, but also for his ability to remain calm and dignified in the face of provocation. He became a symbol of respect and moral strength, a living example of what it means to serve with honor. Catherine was invited to a public broadcast to apologize. Facing the camera, her eyes downcast and her voice trembling, she said, "I wish to apologize to Mr. Marcus Williams and his family. My behavior was unacceptable, my words were dictated by ignorance and presumption, and I deeply regret my arrogance." The public's reaction was immediate. Many applauded her self-awareness, but most could not forget the humiliation she had caused. Catherine had learned the hard way: arrogance, prejudice, and racism can turn a person into an object of mockery and shame, especially when they are unaware of the other person's true identity. Marcus, true to his nature, accepted the apology with quiet courtesy, but without ever losing his dignity. His silence was worth more than any verbal confrontation. He had proven that strength lies not in aggressive words but in respect, patience, and truth. Ultimately, Catherine Holloway's story became a famous lesson in schools and on social media: never judge someone by their color, appearance, or origin, because behind every face there may be a story, a heritage, and a dignity that ignorance can never shake. Marcus Williams continued his service, respected by the crown and admired by the public. The incident remained etched in memory as a silent victory of dignity over arrogance. And Catherine Holloway, for her part, bore forever the mark of this humiliating, but necessary, lesson.